Adrian, thank you so much for joining me today.
That's quite all right. Lovely to be here.
This is going to be the last interview in the series that I've been doing. And it's an honour and a pleasure to be interviewing you, my husband, artistic director of Hotbuckle Productions. So Adrian, can you tell us what Hotbuckle is all about, what you do within Hotbuckle, and how you got to where you are?
Well, Hotbuckle was originally formed by my wife and myself. I don't know whether you know Gemma at all, to actually enable her to get back into the acting game, having been teaching while bringing up our very young children as they were at the time. So we started a company in 2006. And then we did a sort of a couple of things. We did a TIE show, and then we did a community theatre show. And then we did some more adult theatre, not blue, so to speak, but adult theatre. Two pieces, Ballad of a Bird and Joshua. And then Gemma decided she was quite bored of being in the office with me when we weren't doing these shows, and she would like to go and run a theatre, please. So she went and did that, leaving me holding Hotbuckle, the Hotbuckle baby, somewhat at a loss. But nevertheless, I turned to our good friend Fiona, who'd worked on a couple of the shows with us, and she stepped into Gemma's role as the person that organised all the tour bookings. And we together started doing adaptations of classic stories, my adaptations, so they didn't have to pay any rights. And we've gone from strength to strength with that. And so what we do is we do sort of stripped down versions of those. We do sort of four or five handers, depending on the budget, and very little set. We do fairly traditional sort of costumes, and we play our own music, which again, I and the company write. So again, we have no overheads that aren't caused directly by ourselves. And we do that, and we've gone from strength to strength with that really over the years. We have quite a sort of a good big following. We go to theatres from anything from large scale sort of #1 theatres down to tiny art centres. So we're very adaptable, and it's a very enjoyable way of life.
And so how has COVID-19 affected you?
Well, we were about to embark on our spring tour, which is the second tour. We do 2 tours each year of the same show, one in the autumn, one in the spring. We were about to embark on the spring tour of Tess, and we decided by March the 19th that was probably not going to happen, so we had to cancel it. Swiftly followed by all the theatres saying we're having to cancel your coming in anyway. So it was the right thing to do. So the impact was, well, that was the spring tour completely gone. So that was all that income completely gone. We thought, well, we'll pick things up in the autumn. And strangely, that didn't happen either. So we're now hoping that we will be able to tour next spring. But it was a fairly devastating blow, COVID, because obviously, I mean, it's been devastating for everybody for a variety of reasons. For us, it meant nothing of what I do. I adapt plays, I direct them, I write music, I act in them, and I tour them. I haven't been able to do any of that, so I've done a lot of work around the house.
On a professional level, the work has completely dried up for you in terms of a touring theatre company. What support have you had, therefore, from the government?
Well, basically, when we went into lockdown, Gemma, my wife, I don't know if you know her, had recently resigned her post at a sort of arts centre stroke community centre in Madeley. And so was out of work. And to help keep Gemma safe, because there are nasty people out there, help keep her sane, I suggested that she return to the fold of Hotbuckle and request some funding. Put in an application to the Arts Council, which she did. And against all the odds, she only gone and bleeding done it. We got some funding, some quite significant funding, which basically has enabled us to survive and probably, hopefully, therefore, have a future when things return to more normality.
So what was the funding for specifically?
Well, Gemma, interesting that you ask. The funding was specifically because you have to tick a lot of boxes and answer a lot of questions, and it was basically to do with how you would develop your company during this time of COVID that would also be of benefit once COVID is over, for your company therefore to develop and move further on with this idea, not just something you did during lockdown or during COVID, but something that would go beyond that and be of use to the company and the community in general. So we decided between us that I would basically re-record all my adaptations that I've done over the last 10 years, all the classic ones, as podcasts stroke radio plays with the original casts, which I would then put out on the website and on a podcast website. um, with the possibility of that being a sort of another branch of income, but also something that is, it's just part of what we do every year. So we will do a play, we will adapt a classic story, we will tour it, we will also record it, and we will also put it online, both as a video format and as a radio format. And we have started doing that, and we're about a third of the way through, but it's taking a lot longer and there's a lot harder to do than I had anticipated. And I'm learning all the time about what is beneficial and what is not beneficial in terms of recording on separate tracks, on multiple tracks, or on individual tracks, or on one track, and how to edit. And it's quite laborious, but nevertheless, the output at the end is worthwhile.
And
But
so
it's provided no income at all.
no. So I think this is the interesting thing. So the money from the Arts Council was, yes, to create a project. So we came up with a proposal of a project that would keep us working, keep employing actors, and give us some sustainability potentially for the future in terms of buying specific equipment that can cope with this kind of editing, etc. But there was also an aspect of that fundraising, wasn't there, just as a kind of emergency sort of loss of earnings from the
Yes, I mean, probably 50% of it was also loss of earnings from one, if not two tours. Certainly at the time it was one tour, but now it's looking like we're hoping it'll cover the two tours loss. But it won't, but I mean, it will keep us going during the second loss.
So a couple of questions here. So first of all, that money absolutely was a lifesaver, wasn't it? What might have happened if we hadn't have got that money, do you think?
We would have knew it. I knew we wouldn't get it, like we always have done in the past whenever we've applied for funding and not got it. And then we would have found another way of coping. Just we would have adapted and do in our own way, as the government has told everybody to do anyway. But I mean, we would have had to have survived, so we would have done, but it wouldn't have been quite so comfortable.
I think it's fair to say that a lot of people, when the Arts Council announced these emergency bids, which was really early on, and I kind of applaud them for being so proactive in that sense. But what it also did was, I think, a lot of people kind of reacted, perhaps knee-jerk reaction, rather than really taking time to think and research. I know that Emily Bolting at Riverhouse, one of her kind of regrets was that they sort of very quickly put together a bid for some videoing equipment, and actually the equipment they got wasn't quite the right stuff, so there was that sense, I think, of everyone just quickly thinking, gosh, what could we do, how could we diversify?
I think that's inevitable, because we didn't know how long it was going to last. I mean, they said 3 weeks or possibly a month, in the first lockdown. We didn't know what we know now. With the benefit of hindsight, we can all go, oh, we should have been thinking 6 months to a year ahead, not 2 months ahead. So we had no idea what we were in for, and it was, to use a common term these days, unprecedented. Unprecedented.
Would you have come up with a completely different project, do you think, had you known what you know now?
Probably, but not a million miles away, because I mean, basically, we came up with the project of making everything to podcasts. Since then, we have discussed the idea of making the outdoor touring much more viable and much more user friendly in a sense. So basically, turn up with a stage that almost unfolds, and you can, you're kind of ready to go within sort of 30 minutes rather than within 2 hours. Um, so that sort of thing, I think, I'm not sure that I would have come up with the bigger plan early on at any point, even if for whatever I knew, because I think one thing led to the other. I think, the first plan, let's do podcasts of these, was a perfectly reasonable plan. And and I think it led to the next level. I'm finding it hard to explain why, but I think because I'd always had it in the back of my head that I wanted to do podcasts or radio versions of these plays. And I think I was therefore always going to do that given the opportunity. And the development of the stage into a much more user-friendly one outdoors isn't actually that radical. It's just, given the time, how much time we've got to play with these days, it's worth doing. But without that time, I wouldn't worry about it. And it's not something I definitely have to do. I'm just now looking with more, with more time to spare. I'm looking at what can I usefully do that will be of benefit once we come out of this.
Talk to a couple of other people throughout these interviews about the fact that everybody has gone digital, whether that be audio play, visual. Everybody's putting their work into video format, putting it online. Do you think we've just completely flooded basically the internet with things that people don't want to see?
Yeah, but we're just saving our mental health. There's no other way around it. Who cares whether people watch it or not? It's, for me, it's obviously I'd like people to listen to and watch the things I've done, and that's been of great benefit and an inspiration to me throughout my career. The fact that people actually watch what you do and like, hopefully, what you do, or find it funny, which is particularly important to me. But I think the fact that we're all doing it, and probably the audience therefore is reduced in every case by sort of 70%, because there's so much of this stuff around, the audience is shared around. It's almost irrelevant. It's the fact that we're all, those of us who feel the need to be creative, however pretentious that sounds, I don't care really. I know that I do need to be creative and productive. For the sake of all of our mental healths, I think we need to do these things, whether there's an audience available. I mean, and the plus side is there is more of an audience available because there is nothing available live. So, there is potentially many more people looking digitally for entertainment or for stories or for whatever.
And what do you think about sort of people paying for content? Because that just hasn't worked, has it, for us?
Yeah, I don't think it's worked for anybody particularly. It's because, the trouble with the internet is that there's a way of getting everything really cheaply. You could listen to a song or an album for a few pence almost. Whereas, when we were kids, you'd have to spend, £5 to buy the new album or whatever it was. So everything seems really cheap online, if not free. So, and you're in your own home, so you kind of feel a bit cheated paying for something when you're in your own home. If you've gone somewhere, you feel like, oh, well, I obviously have to pay to get in. Yeah, so I think it's very hard to make money online. I mean, musicians have always, found that and moaned about it, understandably, I suppose. And so have filmmakers, who then bring out DVDs, and before they know it, everybody's downloading them for nothing from sort of illegal Russian websites.
So what is your outlook at the moment for Hotbuckle? How do you feel? I mean, we're now into the second wave. We're in the middle of our second lockdown, and it looks like, as you say, potentially nothing's going to be happening until the spring. How are you feeling generally about sort of Hotbuckle and the future of Hotbuckle?
I think that when we come, it's like coming out after a nuclear war, or a nuclear explosion. Everything will have changed. The landscape will have changed, and it's like Trump going into, in becoming the president. Is what COVID-19 is to the world. It's rocked the sort of status quo with something extremely unpleasant. But up until COVID, we all had our place. Um, the National Theatre did everything it could, along with the RSC, to kind of close down regional touring theatre with their online stuff. But regional touring theatre found a way of coping and existing anyway. Small touring theatre companies like mine found their niche, found the places that would book them again and again, and kept their audiences. So we've all had our place. And I think when we come out of lockdown, a lot of the smaller companies and some of the bigger companies, won't exist, or will have to have changed so radically that they're unrecognisable. There'll also be people who are young and the risk takers who'll go, right, we're going to do it at a quarter of the price, we're going to do it twice the amount of actors, and we're going to just take the world by storm. And they're going to sort of blow things out of the water for those of us that have found a financial way of coping. We'll have to adapt and change to exist in the new world order.
Do you think, in a way, there, in some small way, it's a good thing that the culture sector's had this shake-up?
Yes, in some small way it is, because I think there is always a danger with any kind of status quo, that we all get sort of stale, if you like. So there's no harm in having a bit of a shake up and changing the goalposts slightly and making people fight for things. The best kind of art comes out of a struggle, be it love or war or deprivation. It's sad to say that it's because people have nothing to do but express themselves in some way, express their frustration, express their sadness, and they find ways of doing it through music and storytelling and whatever. So yes, there will be great things that come out of this, and I'm not sure Hotbuckle will be a great thing that comes out of it, but we will try and adapt and change and be part of the new world order. But how we'll succeed, time will tell.
Going back again to what I was saying about how everything's gone digitalized, everything's out there, we're kind of flooding everything. There's also the other problem of, as you say, everyone now thinking, right, how do we do outdoor theatre? We've got to start thinking outdoor, outdoor, outdoor. What's that going to do to the theatres then, if we're all adapting to become outdoor companies?
Well, I mean, they've got we've already been speaking to several theatres who are suggesting, oh, we'll organise an outdoor performance. I think theatres will need to think outside the box too to survive, and we've already been speaking to theatres who have suggested we do outdoor performances where last year we would have done indoor performances. So they are suggesting, oh, we're booking stuff at the local park, or we're booking stuff in the local castle, or where it is. So I think they still have the marketing facilities, they still got all the data, audience databases, etc. They've got the staff. A lot of them are voluntary, but hopefully those that are still employed are used to taking tickets and to organising large groups of people in a safe way. They've got the technicians, they've got the lights and the PAs, so they have as much chance of making this work as we do, and they have a place in it just as we do as well.
Yeah, and just listening to you talk there as well, maybe it's a good thing for theatres have to start reaching out to their communities and collaborating with the local parks.
Well, yeah, the upside of that is it's more visible to the wider community, an outdoor performance in a park. I don't mean they can just see it better. I mean they just see it at all.
So you're feeling positive about the future of Hotbuckle. You can see
Well,
a way through.
We have very low overheads because we have our rehearsal studios on site. By on site, I mean at home, and I don't have to pay anyone to keep them on, because between tours we don't employ actors, we can't afford to, so we employ actors per tour for the tour. So yeah, our overheads are low, so we can hunker down and be mothballed. It's just what it's going to look like when we come up over the parapet in 2021 and go and try and work out where we're going to go to tour. And audiences are going to be a bit jittery, but they're also desperate for stuff, desperate to kind of, people do like going to watch plays and musicals and musicians and things like that. They enjoy the looking at real people who are vulnerable, but yet who strive for excellence, and to entertain or to impress, or to just to express themselves in a way that's interesting.
You did receive some self-employment emergency relief, didn't you, from the government?
The government gave me 80% of that which they perceive that I earn. So I don't earn a great deal, so I got 80% of not a great deal.
And was that just a one-off, or does that keep coming?
I've been getting it no, it was twice off, and I'm hoping for a third off. There's a potential that it might happen again because of this new lockdown for those of us who are self-employed.
There's been a few people sort of saying, because I've talked to a lot of people about how the inconsistency of how people are paid within the sort of culture industry, arts and culture, and I think we as artists have enabled that through accepting work for very little or what have you. What do you think about that? How can we solve that problem?
I don't think we can, and I'm not that worked up about it, because most people do what we do because we love doing it and we are driven to do it. It doesn't mean to say everybody's got to pay us to do it or pay us loads of money to do it. I have been fortunate enough to do what I do for my entire working life, but I've never earned very much money. But I'm not bitter about that, because I've enjoyed doing what I've been doing. Periodically, fortunately, I have had, good pay for the work that I've done, or pay that's really, really good pay. But most of the time I've had inadequate pay for the work that I've done. But I get more satisfaction from doing what I do than a lot of people I know who get paid extremely well for doing something they don't enjoy doing. As an auditioner for actors, because obviously I audition them for my tours, the expectation of young men, certainly because there are more parts and there are fewer of them doing the job as actors, their expectations make them arrogant and lazy, and I have no respect for that at all. I like people who want to do the job regardless of how little or much they get paid, who do the job because they enjoy the job. The money is just, I know we need money to live, but I don't expect everybody to pay me or anybody else something to do just because they enjoy doing it. I expect if we make it commercially viable and people enjoy it, great, then we've ticked 2 boxes. But we've only ticked the box that we enjoy doing it, then we can't expect to get paid that much. It's it's very difficult to justify pay for a lot of jobs. I'm not saying nobody should get paid. I'm just saying it's difficult to justify why an essential worker in one sphere gets a pittance and an essential worker in another sphere gets £250,000 a year or more. So there's never equality in pay, and it's not something I dwell on much.
Would you agree, though, that there are only certain people who can afford to work for very little?
It just depends how much you want to do it. I know people who've come from very sort of meager backgrounds who make it work, and people who come from meager backgrounds who can't afford to make it work and don't. 2 people come out of drama school. One is from a well-off background and one is from a much less well-off background. It's more about aspirations as to whether they succeed as opposed to they might both earn very little, but it's about whether they believe they should carry on doing this and have the kind of the guts to carry on doing it, regardless of the fact they're not earning very much. I mean, I understand the point. I do understand that point. Had I not been supported by my wife and my previous girlfriends, I still would have a whole line of them. I still would have carried on doing what I'm doing regardless.
How have you kept yourself motivated? And you've mentioned sort of mental health quite a bit. have you fared?
I've had good days and bad days and mediocre days. Most days are mediocre. About every third week I go into a bad few days, it seems. I'm beginning to see the pattern now. It is quite demoralizing, and not having a definite plan or a goal or a sort of time scale to work to, no deadlines. But it does make being creative, I'm going to call it expressive, being expressive, quite difficult, because you don't know what you're doing it for. When's this going to be seen? Who's going to listen to it? The best thing is, yes, that you're expressing it for yourself. So if I'm doing some writing, then at least I'm getting something off my chest.
How do you think the government's fared?
How do I think they've fared? As any conservative government would, really. I'm not a particularly political animal, but I'm not particularly keen on conservative Republican types. So yeah, they just tried to keep the economy and all their big companies and their fat mates going, at the expense of the health of the poorer parts of the country. And yeah, so it was economy before health, and of course, therefore, health has really suffered.
What's made you the saddest about the epidemic?
I feel absolutely devastated for my children, and all other children of their age and younger. Really, already the sort of planet was heading towards the sort of cesspit, which I felt ashamed of, and then there's a unprecedented disease that comes across and comes along and just ravages the world, and you can't help feeling it's due to various big countries' foreign policy that wet markets like that exist. So I feel devastated that my children don't have that carefree childhood that I had. And yeah, so that's what's made me most sad is the effect it's had on all those innocent young people who are not responsible for the state of the world, but who are going to inherit it.
And finally, then, what would you like your legacy to be?
I want to continue doing what I've done, which is do all the things I love doing and trying to earn money from them, enough money to live, and depending on my wife. You'd be nothing without me, she said once.
Okay, is there anything else you want to say?
I'm sorry. I can honestly say this has affected me mentally much more than I thought it would. I'm used to spending a lot of time entertaining myself, and by that I don't mean watching the telly. I mean doing things that are productive and need to be done, and tinkering around the house, around the garden, around the field, doing things towards the next tour, blah blah blah. I'm used to doing that all the time anyway. So what's changed? What has changed is I don't know when I'm doing it for. I suppose there's no timeline.
Adrian Preater, thank you so much for joining me and for being my rock.
Yay!
And for making me laugh.
That's all I'm good for. And find that they enjoy it. But anyway, my point being, it's much more generally visible. Have I? It's much more generally visible if it is outdoors, because, you know, people who don't see